So good morning. Welcome to the January 28th, 2026 hearing of the Brookline Planning Board. We have a major item on the agenda, which is an update on the proposed Chestnut Hill commercial area zoning and guidelines. But prior to that, just open the floor for any public comment on matters not on the agenda. Just starting with members of the Planning Board. Polly?
Well,
Planning staff as well.
okay. I just wanted to tell you, I think last week I was telling you about the potential zoning amendments that are coming up. And the one I don't think I mentioned is at 20 Pleasant Street or 26 Pleasant Street by Nordblum. Jeffrey Allen is their attorney. They are planning to submit a warrant article, which is not ready yet for prime time, that would allow a change in zoning for one parcel on Pleasant Street that would allow a 7-story building, 103 units of apartments. And so you'll be hearing more about that at a later date.
Excellent.
That's it.
I have an interesting tidbit. I just heard this morning that we all remember the new condo development at 14 Green Street, where we had a lot of discussion about the extraordinarily small retail space that we thought might be a cafe
Mm-hmm.
on floor. My partner Rhonda saw something this morning that's going to be an art gallery. Something I hadn't anticipated, but that could be an interesting outcome. By City Realty also developed that building, as a matter of fact.
Meredith probably knows about that. So.
Good. Oh, and there's Blair.
Oh, good.
All right.
Sorry to be late. It was very hard to get on this morning.
So we're just finishing up a comment on matters not on the agenda. If you have anything, you're welcome to jump in before we move on to the primetime event.
Oh, good. Looking forward to it.
So Maria, I guess I'll invite you to kick off that part. I see members of the Sasaki team here as well.
Yeah.
So
actually, I'm going to turn it over to Meredith Mooney, who is the Director of Economic Development and Long-Term Planning, who is managing this this project. So Meredith.
Thank you, Maria. Good morning. Good to see everyone. So I am going to screen share here. And so before I go into the screen sharing, I did just want to give a huge amount of thanks to Maria for jumping in. Our division has been at half capacity since October. And Maria, we've been working with Maria on the Chestnut Hill, the rezoning effort, the design guidelines, but Maria has really stepped up and kind of gone above and beyond to help us make sure that, the zoning and the design guidelines are, in the best possible condition they can be as we're gearing up towards a conversation with town meeting. So thank you so much, Maria. And then we're also joined by our team at Sasaki, Martin and Ethan, who have been wonderful to work with as well. They're going to be presenting an abbreviated version of the design guidelines here in just a minute. But I did want to, I'm going to share my full screen, which is always risky, but I'm going to just walk through a quick presentation just to orient you in terms of some background about the broader Chestnut Hill commercial area study that the zoning and the design guidelines have emerged from. So the origins of the Chestnut Hill, what we are now calling the Chestnut Hill Commercial Area Study, are in the 2005 Comprehensive Plan. So this was sort of identified along with a series of recommendations that you could kind of put under the bucket of creating a gateway west along Boylston Street. I think the Planning Board is very familiar with a lot of the focus and attention that we've had on Gateway East, sort of in the Brookline Village area at the Boston-Brookline border, with the infrastructure improvement project there and a lot of the development around Brookline Place. So, the vision in 2005 was there would be sort of equal attention placed on the Chestnut Hill commercial area as the Gateway West. And there was the suggestion about creating a district plan, looking for more opportunities for commercial mixed-use development and amending the zoning to allow for broader uses. And then it talked specifically about the importance of amending the Office 2.0 zoning, which is for the Chestnut Hill Office Park at 1280 to 1330 Boylston Street. So fast forward almost 20 years later, we are now, talking about the Chestnut Hill commercial area and sort of the district commercial area planning context. Prioritized in the 2005 Comprehensive Plan. And so these are just a couple of important key considerations that we've been talking about today with this work. So, given the sort of increased sense of urgency around the long-term structural budget deficits that the town is facing. Maximizing the commercial development opportunity in the Chestnut Hill commercial area is certainly a leading priority. And then as we were preparing to launch this study in spring of 2024, there was a change in ownership of the Chestnut Hill Office Park, 1280 to 1330 Boylston Street, which is a really uniquely large site throughout town. It's over 5 acres. It's something that we've been talking about collectively for decades in terms of its significance in terms of economic development potential. And within the context of the Chestnut Hill commercial area study, redevelopment of the site really has the potential to be the catalyst for, the evolution of the Chestnut Hill commercial area as a whole. So the study goals, as we've talked about, the importance of incentivizing significant net new commercial tax growth and really trying to incentivize, as much commercial development as possible, and then enhancing the livability and identity of the Chestnut Hill commercial area. This is an overview of the, timeline process that we've undergone through the study work. We launched in spring 2024 with outreach community engagement. We have been working, this is a staff-led initiative, sort of in contrast to the select board appointed study committees that we have traditionally had for these. We're sort of experimenting with a new format. And we've been working with a community advisory group, which has included Mark as the planning board representative. And we're very grateful for all of the time and energy that Mark has invested in this. Blair has also attended a lot of those meetings as well. And that group has been providing, guidance, feedback to staff as we worked our way through this process. They've convened almost 20 times. We've also been working with a subcommittee of the Economic Development Advisory Board that's been very focused on assisting staff with the study recommendations. And, the subcommittee with EDAB includes a lot of people who are actively, as part of their day jobs, involved in real estate development. And so, they've been very helpful in sort of providing input about, how we craft zoning that's actually going to be usable from the development standpoint. We've been keeping the select board regularly updated about this process. And then the Housing Advisory Board has, as Steve knows, has heard a couple of updates, more sort of about the study, more peripherally, but focused on how City Realty, with their redevelopment proposal for the Chestnut Hill Office Park, will comply with the town's inclusionary zoning bylaw. And we are now gearing up for the February 25th spring warrant article deadline, when the hopes of having something for town meeting to consider in May with the rezoning proposal. Matt had asked that we just give a quick overview of sort of the kind of leading dominant issues in terms of public engagement and public comment. And so I would certainly welcome Blair and Mark and anyone else who's been, listening through all of these community advisory group discussions to add to this or sort of add some layers of nuance. We have certainly heard that there's a lot of interest in creating ground floor retail uses that are more aligned with the neighborhood needs. We've heard a lot about, restaurants that ultimately haven't been able to be successful in the area. There's no longer a coffee shop there. You have to cross Boylston Street to go to the street in order to, have a restaurant. There aren't a lot of the retail establishments that are conducive to like community building. It's dry cleaners and banks. So there's this certainly a strong desire to create incentives for the types of ground floor retail uses that people really want to see in their neighborhood and have easy walking access to. And then related to that, we've heard a lot about, the need to improve the pedestrian experience and then also multimodal safety more broadly throughout the area. We have the big challenge of Route 9 as cutting through the study area. What are the opportunities to make that safer and to create more of a pleasant pedestrian experience throughout the entire study area? The issue of height, where has certainly been a dominant issue in terms of public comment and discussion. Max height of 14 stories with one of the bonus incentives is something that people have talked a lot about and have a lot of concerns around. So I think throughout Sasaki's presentation, Ethan will certainly be pointing out components of the zoning and sort of within the zoning envelope where we've tried to create transitions and then also layer on additional requirements in terms of open space and setbacks and step backs that are really going to minimize the impacts of height and promote a positive pedestrian experience. Preserving the character of Heath Street has also been a dominant theme. If you've ever walked around the Chestnut Hill commercial area, going from Boylston Street to Heath Street, just over a couple blocks, is a very different, dramatically different experience from a pedestrian perspective. So, there's a lot in the zoning that's really tried to preserve the character of Heath Street as kind of this quieter refuge, more pleasant pedestrian experience and way of moving, east to west along the study area. And then there have also been a lot of concerns around traffic impacts, the potential for additional traffic to be routed through Heath Street. So the developer for Chestnut Hill Office Park has agreed to no new vehicular connection between Boylston and Heath Street on the Chestnut Hill Office Park site. So all of the circulation will be internal. They'll be utilizing the existing curb cuts on Boylston Street. We have done a sort of transportation study to come up with some conceptual improvements for multimodal improvements throughout the area. And we are working on finalizing sort of the infrastructure capacity testing based on the amount of density that we're contemplating about adding to the area through the zoning effort. So we still, it will be a couple weeks until we have that. What we do know is that from City Realty, that they will be going through the MEPA process. So, that's sort of an added layer of accountability with additional mitigation requirements. And this is an overview of all the components of the study. These are the key components that we're going to be talking about today, specifically the design guidelines that reference the special district zoning that you received in your packets in the draft format. So these design guidelines are intended to serve as sort of your review criteria and point of reference as the planning board is reviewing applications that come in under the zoning overlay. And the planning board will be able to modify these guidelines with the exception of sort of the standards that are baked into the zoning bylaw. But, this is going to be your document that can evolve to reflect best practices and industry standards. And that is just my introductory table setting. I will stop sharing and turn things over to Ethan and the Sasaki team.
Morning, everyone. Ethan Lace-Sleeper. I'm a senior planner at Sasaki here with Martin.
Martin Zogren, urban designer principal at Sasaki, working alongside Ethan, who I'll let run through the overall presentation so we get through it pretty quickly.
Yeah, sure. So we'll try to get through this in about 25 minutes. I know some folks have to leave at 9:30, so I want to leave enough time for conversation. So I'll go fairly quickly, but we can always come back to slides in discussion. So share my screen. Okay, so as Meredith said, this is an abridged version. Oops. There, can you all see the presentation? Great. An abridged version of the design guidelines will give you a quick overview of the existing conditions. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with those. Talk a little bit about the planning framework, what are the objectives? Meredith, alluded to those relative to the economic development potential, and then really want to focus on the public realm and transitioning this from, a somewhat, disjointed series of streets and parcels and land uses to something that in the future can be more consistent with a, intentional identity around new commercial uses and improved public realm and open spaces. And then talk a little bit about the massing controls. Those are what the advisory committee meetings have focused on and are really where the design guidelines and the zoning really interlace. They're the elements that govern heights and setbacks and density. Then we have some conceptual eye-level views just to give a sense of, what the existing conditions are, what the zoning envelopes look like, and then what architecture and building bulk might start to look like in the future. Not designs by any means, but just intended to convey a sense of scale. And then in the appendix, we probably won't have time to get into that in the presentation, but happy to go into it afterwards. We have the design controls, and those are a little bit more specific than the massing controls. They get into recommendations about materiality and have suggestions for future developers and architects to follow relative to the public realm, to commercial buildings, to residential buildings, and also to parking structures. And then we've also done some quick shadow studies, just looking at the impacts of the zoning envelopes. So, as we know today, the site is really a mix of residential uses of various densities from single family up to triple deckers and larger apartment buildings, and a variety of small scale retail, commercial, medical office. And really the easternmost extent of the site and what's being zoned as the NMU is largely a series of smaller lots, and they start to get somewhat bigger as you move further west and to the north in the transit-oriented district. Ownership on the east, so all the parcels in gray are kind of varied ownership. The parcels with colored fill, show you where there's some consolidated or common ownership between the parcels. And this is just a map showing the zoning district. So again, the neighborhood mixed use zones on the east side are comprised of largely smaller lots with disjointed ownership. The commercial 3.0 area has some smaller lots and larger lots than the 4.0 district east of Tully Street, with a large proportion of it owned by City Realty. And then the 4.0 east of Tully Street has a fair amount of parcels that are owned by growth companies. And then the transit-oriented mixed-use district has some parcels owned by WS Development. So the planning framework, we really, at the outset of this, reviewed some of the community engagement work that was done to arrive at these development principles. So, first and foremost, as I said, we want to develop this area as a unified district. And to Meredith's point about the economic development opportunity here and the budget shortfalls, prioritizing high density mixed use development to increase commercial tax revenues. And doing that while emphasizing green space, environmental resilience, thinking about how parking can be provided to ensure there's adequate parking, but that it's not a dominant presence in the district, and really creating a pedestrian first environment. So there's some subtle things that we're doing with setbacks to create more room for pedestrians that you'll see, and requiring high quality architectural design that's focused on a human scale. And that's where some of the massing controls and design controls start to work together to modulate the building massing and form, but also think about materiality and articulation. And certainly with the transit-oriented mixed-use district, we want to maximize transit integration and reduce vehicular trips. That zone specifically has a lower parking requirement, and we want to do everything we can to encourage folks to walk up to the T station there. So commercial requirements. So this drawing shows where the 60% ground floor commercial requirement exists in the red bands here. So along Route 9 primarily. And in yellow, we're seeing where you can get a waiver out of that 60% commercial ground floor requirement. So, further east in the NMU districts, along Sheaf Street and along Holly, Tully, and Hammond Street as you get kind of further away from that Route 9 corridor. And then along Heath Street, Dunster, and the westernmost extent of the 4.0 district, those areas are exempt from that requirement. And this diagram is still in process, but it's been kind of the product of a series of conversations between Sasaki and the planning department, and also the EDAB committee, and conversations with developers about kind of where we think the most opportune areas for commercial uses are in the future. We also want to ensure that, as this area develops over time, that we're making it easy for folks to access existing open spaces, and also providing new open space linkages through some of the larger blocks. So you can see that, we're suggesting future access points across Heath Street to the south to Holyhood Cemetery. We're also suggesting that there are some connections on the NMU into some existing open space across Heath Street. And that, you know, there may be opportunities for smaller distributed open spaces within the eastern portion of the block and connections through some of these larger blocks in the 4.0 district that help to create porosity and connection, you know, between Heath Street and Route 9, and ideally, you know, in the future to Hammond Pond and recreational opportunities north. Also thinking about the TOM district and opportunities to connect both north-south through that district, again, potentially to, you know, future trails around Hammond Pond, but also, you know, east-west into the street and what, you know, may eventually become of the Star Market site. So the public realm, you know, what we really want to encourage with the design guidelines here is a commitment to sustainability, to creating a cohesive identity, and, you know, as I was saying, maximizing access to nearby open spaces with through block connections, and then creating a diverse series of public open spaces. So it's not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution for each sub-district. There are varied tree canopy requirements. So for smaller lots, there's a 2% requirement. For larger lots, 15% requirement. And then within the NMU districts and 3.0 sub-districts, there are open space requirements tied to the number of residential units. Whereas in the transit-oriented mixed-use district, it's more, it's a percentage of the development parcel size. And in the TOM district, there's more flexibility on the amount of hardscape that can exist versus softscape. Whereas in the 4.0 district, which again is comprised of those larger parcels and contiguous ownership, the 5-acre parcel Meredith was mentioning, you know, that's where we want to encourage larger open spaces. So there's requirements that at least, you know, 15% of open space up to 30% permitted as hard surfaced and terraces compared to the 50% hardscape in the TOM district. And that's really to help facilitate these through block connections and provide this, you know, diversity of lush plantings, but also hardscape and, you know, spill out spaces adjacent to buildings for people to use. So jumping into the massing controls. So again, this is the part that's really interlaced with the zoning that regulates building bulk. Taking a look at heights here. So starting on the east with the NMU district, the base zoning heights here are 50 feet with a bonus of up to 75 feet. That translates from roughly to 4 to 6 stories. The 3.0 district is 88 feet. So that would be in the range of 7 stories. The transit-oriented mixed-use district and the eastern extent of the 4.0 are also in that 88 feet to have a consistent height with the 3.0. You can see that the northernmost portion of the TOM district steps down to 75 feet, 6 stories as you move up Hammond Street. And then the center of the 4.0 east and west zones. So that's a 150-foot base zoning. So, you know, in the 12-story range with a bonus that could allow you to go up to 175 feet or 14 stories. And then it steps down again on the westernmost extent of the 4.0 district to that 88 feet, 7-story range. And I should say, you know, in order for a parcel to, you know, take advantage of this, there not only are there size requirements of the parcel for a ½ acre in the commercial districts, but also requirements that 50% of the floor area is commercial, of the gross floor area of the development. And you only qualify for that additional height bonus in the commercial districts if you are 60% or greater commercial. And you only qualify for that height bonus in the neighborhood mixed use if you're providing a higher level of affordability. So ground level setbacks play, you know, a similar role in terms of defining the public realm, but also helping to break down larger parcels. So starting with the NMU district on the east, we have a slightly deeper setback along Dunster Road from the residential districts to the east. And then these solid lines here, purple lines, are a 5-foot minimum setback. So again, that's creating a little bit more breathing room around these blocks for, you know, enhanced sidewalks or street planting. Then as we look at the TOM and the 3.0 district, the dashed lines start to indicate a 5-foot maximum setback, ensuring that, you know, we're not allowing buildings or developments to introduce things like surface parking lots or setback from Route 9, so that we can prioritize a, you know, consistent street frontage along Route 9 that is conducive to commercial development. This northern boundary of the TOM district has a 5-foot minimum setback on it, but there's a kind of caveat there that it could be reduced to 0, because we understand that there's common ownership across the city lines here. As we move further west and look at the southern border of the 4.0 districts, we can see that there's a 25-foot minimum setback from Heath Street, and that's to provide additional landscape buffer and additional building setbacks along the Holyhood Cemetery, to really kind of preserve what people enjoy to be a fairly kind of green experience along there today, with, you know, walking along the sidewalk and accessing the cemetery as an open space amenity. And then in the westernmost 4.0 district, there's also a 55-foot maximum setback. So we want the development to kind of be within that sweet spot where it's providing enough buffer, but not set back so much that it feels suburban. And then there's also a 40-foot minimum setback on the west side to help buffer from the residential development to the west. So this is a illustration of the zoning envelope, and I'm sure many of you are kind of familiar with this terminology, but just to explain for those who may not be, that the zoning envelope shows the extent to which future buildings could be built, but a development proposal also comes with like FAR requirements, height, and through block connections. So the actual, you know, buildings would not literally be able to take up as much space as these envelopes are indicating. And you can see here kind of ghosted in some of the existing building massing. And again, the heights are consistent with the plan we just looked at, you know, starting on the east with the neighborhood mixed use. It's in that, you know, 50-foot range with a bonus up to 75 feet with the 3.0 transit-oriented mixed use, and this eastern extent of the 4.0, that's in the 88 feet. And then it steps up to the 150 to 175 feet in the center of the 4.0 districts, and then steps down again to that 88 feet on the west. So this, I should say, this shows on the 4.0 district that 25-foot minimum setback, and then this shows the 55-foot maximum setback. And here's a view from the north looking south. So we have the NMU district on the left side of the screen here with the lower heights. And here you can start to see that transition from the, you know, 50 to 75-foot NMU and the 88-foot 3.0 to that step down in the 4.0 district that's 88 feet, that then steps up to the 150 to 175 as you move further west towards Newton. This drawing also starts to indicate what is required by various frontage ratio and through block and open space connection requirements. So these areas in gray are not fixed, but they represent a percentage of the total frontage and help to create through block connections, but also help to break down larger building masses over 200 feet. So that exists largely in the 4.0 district in yellow and the transit-oriented mixed-use district in beige here. Another way that we're modulating facades is through upper level setbacks. So these are, you know, a fairly effective design strategy to, you know, help to mitigate the building massing and help upper levels of taller buildings recede. And in addition to that, we're also integrating horizontal datums. And again, these are not necessarily a one-size-fits-all solution. So we have upper level setbacks that are required above the 3rd or 4th level in our taller buildings in the 4.0 district. And then we have those required, above the 4th level in our lower scale districts like the NMU. And that, goes for the horizontal datums as well. Now, these are more just architectural expressions. They can be something like a cornice or, just architectural detailing that occur, either above the 1st level or the 2nd level in our lower scale districts like the NMU up to, the 3rd level or wherever the podium stops in commercial construction in the 4.0 district and 3.0 district. Another element, we're incorporating into the design guidelines is the idea of these gateway corners. So these are areas where we want to emphasize the kind of transition, from the Route 9 corridor into this this series of commercial sub-districts. So we're emphasizing this gateway at Route 9 and Hammond Street. So as you're moving east along Route 9, the corner of this TOM district, the 3.0 district, and these NMU districts, also as you're kind of moving north-south there, as well as the entrance from Route 9 if you're heading east onto Tully Street. And so what these are opportunities for architects to start to break down the corners, whether that's at upper levels or lower levels with insets and canopies. And so we're providing general guidance here, but the idea is that we build in enough flexibility in the design guidelines to allow architects and developers to work with the planning board and the planning department to create unique architectural identities at these signature corners. So we'll jump into some eye-level views now. And again, these are not intended to be architectural designs. They're just quick representations of what could happen in the future. And so looking along the NMU sub-district, looking west, we're right at Dunster Road here. So existing condition, you can see the crane here at the beginning of the construction of 1180 Boylston. And this is the current proposed and mostly complete construction. This is the massing model of that 1180 Boylston project in white here. And then you can see in the NMU district, there's the purple here indicating the 4-level base zoning. And then by bonus, through providing more inclusionary housing, you could get up to another 2 stories. In the back, you're seeing the 7 stories permitted in the 3.0 district. And beyond that, you're seeing the 4.0 district that allows you to go up to 150 or up to 175 with a bonus, with that 60% commercial requirement. And just a quick sketch of what that could start to look like. So again, we're seeing some of the actual approved architectural designs of that 1180 Boylston project. And we're seeing the kind of bonus scenario, the full 6 stories of the NMU district on the west here. And we're seeing those commercial 3.0 and 4.0 districts beyond. So this next view, we're going to be looking north from Hammond Street, kind of between the 2 NMU districts. So we can see, in this section here, how the base zoning allows up to this 4 stories or 50 feet. And then with the bonus achieved by providing additional affordable housing, you can get up to 6 stories or 75 feet. So this is what it looks like today. You can see the 1180 project kind of 3/4 of the way topped out. And then just adding in the zoning envelope. So again, this is where there isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. And one thing we're doing in the neighborhood mixed-use zone, so from Heath, from Dunster all the way to Hawley, is along that Heath frontage, we're requiring a 10-foot upper level step back above the 4th level. So if a developer was to take advantage of that bonus, those additional floors would be set back a little bit from Heath Street to help step down the scale. And this is what that could start to look like here with, some commercial along Hammond Street, potentially wrapping around a little bit onto Heath Street. And then some upper level step backs. And you can see the transit oriented mixed use district in the background here. So moving kind of further up, so this is a section taken through Hammond Street adjacent to the transit oriented mixed use district. So this is showing a section through the rear portion of the site that's capped at that 75 feet. Again, when you're closer up to Route 9, you can go up to the 88 feet. This is what it looks like today with the CVS and the gas station. This is a little bit more refined than just the zoning envelope. We're, imagining perhaps, some hotel, residential uses and ground floor commercial per the requirements, and, what it could potentially look like. So lower heights as you move further north up Hammond Street, and then, 7 stories. It could be residential, it could be commercial, but the key is providing that 60% active commercial frontage along those hard corners of Route 9 and Hammond Street. So looking at Heath Street, so this section is cut along Heath Street between Tully and Hawley. And we can see along Heath Street here, we're requiring these 10-foot step backs above the 3rd or 4th level, and then the 7th or 8th level. And again, the step backs along Heath are more significant than the step backs along other streets or frontages. And that's really to provide a little bit more relief to the notion that Heath Street can become more of a kind of a green corridor, and that we can emphasize that through additional street plantings and greenery there. So this is kind of what it looks like today. We have the cemetery on the right and the kind of existing office uses on the left. This is the proposed massing. And then this is, what it could look like in the future, heading east along Heath Street there. And then another view a little bit, further back on Heath Street. And again, the elevation of Heath Street is, in the ballpark of 8 to 10 feet higher than Route 9. So these buildings will actually be depressed a little bit from the street elevation as you're walking. So this is a view kind of coming up as you're coming around that curve onto Heath Street, the kind of first opportunity to view that proposed development. So this is what the current development proposal looks like that fits within the zoning envelope, and what it could potentially look like with new landscaping and a little bit of articulation on the buildings. And I'll wrap up in a second here. So this is a section, cut through Route 9. So we have the street on the left side of the image with some of the, retail parking, and then we have Route 9 in the middle. And this is where, we're seeing that taking advantage of that maximum 55-foot setback. And then along Route 9, we're saying that you could do a 5 to 10-foot step back. We're not requiring a full 10 feet. Because it's a slightly fewer folks walking on Route 9, and it's trying to be more deferential on the Heath Street side with the 10-foot setback. And again, we can see the 12-story 150-foot base zoning up to 175 feet with the bonus for 60% commercial requirement. So this is the existing condition today. What the massing could look like. And here we're kind of ghosting in the bonus levels. In the background here, we're seeing what could theoretically be built on that growth company's site. That's the kind of linear surface parking lot today. And then, what it could look like in the future. So I know that was a lot, so I'll stop there and kind of open it up to questions, or Meredith, if you want to do a quick recap.
So I'm gonna just, given that I have 20 minutes, I want to set up a transition because I imagine that we won't finish conversation in 20 minutes. Is there another member of the board who's intending to stay until 10 who I could delegate the chair to as I leave?
I'm planning to stay to the end, however long, so I could help
Great.
out if you want.
All right, so at 9:30, if you see me disappear, Blair's in charge. But thank you, Ethan. That was a great overview. And obviously attached to the agenda that's posted on the planning board's website are all the other pages that you didn't go through. It's quite comprehensive, well presented, I think really clear for non-design professionals to understand the intentions and kind of the dimensionality of some of the guidelines. So really appreciate the effort put in there. I'm going to start questions from the board and then, given time, potentially questions from the public as well. Blair, your hand went up first. We'll start with you.
Yes, so I've been involved with this quite a bit, and my comments I want to take from the standpoint of being a member of the planning board, being aware of the importance that this area of town has represented in terms of opportunity for additional commercial development to support the town. I'm hoping that as we move forward, that the planning board has some kind of opportunity to get into the more granular detail of this presentation by Sasaki. I mean, I think they've done an excellent job. And I think that they've really underlined in their presentation what I would say is the challenge that the town faces, which is the proposals as, being envisioned and illustrated by Sasaki really shows an urban design. And in this area of town, which is currently it's suburban. And I think that the issue that the town faces is really, is this the right move to make this an urban design, island? I mean, maybe the street turns into a more urban area as life goes on. But I think that's the challenge, and I think they did a very good job of illustrating that. And I think that's going to be what town meeting's going to need to determine. That being said, I think that there are two important broad goals here, which I think personally I support, and I think that neighbors have also supported, which is the need for more commercial development. I don't think that anyone's been objecting to that. I certainly don't. I think it's very important. I think we're in a tough market environment in terms of just requiring more, let's have it all be commercial. But from everything that EDAB has been saying, particularly the subcommittee, that's not a reasonable rezoning because of current market forces. Secondly, I think everyone on the board and a large percentage of the people in town realize the need for more housing. And I support both those goals. More housing is critical. And I think if nothing is done other than to allow for housing here, I think that's a step in the right direction. So just to kind of reiterate it, I think that the design guidelines and the illustrations, I think, really well present what I think is the dilemma in town here, which is this an appropriate place for an urban design? With that, I would love to hear what the other members of the planning board think.
Thanks, Blair. I think that's actually a quite provocative question. And it reminds me what we're looking at here is, let's call it a 100-year projection, right? No one is looking to develop all of this simultaneously so that 5 years from now, those renderings are what you see. So the same way, my opinion, the same way that the street has evolved to what it is over the last 25 years, there will be a similar evolution of this area over time. So I don't feel like there's going to be a switch where it goes from suburban to urban. I think it will be much more gradual. And the generations of Brookliners who kind of live here through that process won't find it to be such a dramatic transition because it will be incremental over time as individual parcels are bundled and developments are proposed. So I appreciate the kind of framing of that, but I also think it's not going to be quite the dramatic change. But the starting point and the end point, as you say, is probably the question, go from suburban to urban. But I think that that's a very long time span between those two states.
Well, I
which
think-
gives me some comfort that there will be some shock absorption, if you will,
Right.
just based on time.
Well, I think that certainly if the city real estate management development proposal as currently envisioned goes forward, I think there will be a very consequential change here.
Oh, sure.
for-
Yeah, some of those larger parcels for sure. And the one note I had, we don't need to talk about this, but 60% of ground floor commercial, I looked at how much square footage that is, and to Blair's point, that's going to probably suggest some fairly big box, like a Target or a Walmart, something of scale in order to fill it, because you're not going to fill it with coffee shops and pizza slice shops. I mean, I love that vision, but we can't possibly create that many small businesses in that amount of square footage. So at some point, how that space is utilized will depend on the scale of the tenant spaces that the developers think they can market and find tenants for. Andrea's hand went up next.
Can I just pop in real quick?
Sure.
Sorry, I just got a call from the school nurse. I gotta go pick up my kindergartner.
Oh, sorry, Tommy.
Yeah, so I agree with everything that Blair and Matt said, and I have some more thoughts of my own, but I gotta pop. I'm really
Appreciate
sorry.
that.
Okay. I agree with what Blair was saying, that also, with the market forces, I think it's gonna look like we're gonna need more residential than commercial. I wanted to get into some of the details of the design guidelines. On the slide relating to horizontal datums, I thought it mentioned establishing a datum at levels 3 and 4. And I just wondered if that was a typo, because all of the other renderings and diagrams sort of highlighted a datum at the first floor level or second floor level, which helps. Those renderings did create a more human scale. And I think if you had this emphasis at the levels 3 and 4, I know that helps break up the wall or the massing, but lowering it would help with a human scale. And then I was trying to understand the slide on the ground level setbacks. One of the things that Ethan, you said was that the sidewalks on Route 9 aren't very walkable. And I actually think that they could be more walkable despite the amount of traffic, if there were deeper setbacks, and having the maximum 5-foot setback, I think could be increased. And then also I'm into setbacks. When developers can get, the bonus for creating some affordable housing, they can go higher, but again feel that there should be additional setbacks. I felt that a lot of the buildings were, especially the higher ones, could be set back further at the top. And then lastly, if there's any chance to show how shadows affect the cemetery and the streetscape. And that's it.
Sure.
I agree. There are shadow studies in here somewhere, yes?
Yeah, I'm happy to pull those up, and I can also just quickly clarify a couple things if you'd like.
Yeah, that'd be great, especially on
Okay.
the Adams. I'm seeing
Yeah,
the
so-
Q4 and the renderings and the examples. Just want to make sure we're looking at the same thing, Andrea. was-
Yeah, that could have been a typo, but the intent and what we're showing is that the horizontal datums are either at the first or the second level, and then the step backs are
Yep.
at the third or the fourth
Okay.
level.
I just
Yeah.
thought it said 3 and 4 for.
It may have. I'll go
Okay.
back and double check that. And then in the last, subcommittee meetings, we were discussing the setbacks along Route 9 pretty extensively. So I'll say that's somewhat fluid, whether at one point it was a build to line, now it's a max 5-foot setback. So I think that's something we can continue to explore with Meredith and team. And then, yeah, I guess the additional affordable bonus setbacks, we've done that 10-foot setback above the 4th level for the NMU along Heath. But I think I'll let kind of Meredith and Maria opine a little further. I know some of that was derived from existing kind of market studies and densities that we wanted to get like a 50-unit project to make it feasible. So I think we'll just look at that in more detail. And I can pull up the shadow studies really quickly here.
If you wouldn't mind just showing those 3 pages, and then anyone who's interested, I think, could go to our agenda, open the document, and spend some more time looking at those.
Yeah, and the short story here is the cemetery doesn't get any shadow because it's on the south side here, but we'll look at March 9 a.m. So you've got shadows extending out across Route 9. Then March noon, they're not extending out quite as far. The sun's higher in the sky. March 3 p.m., they're tilting a little bit to the northeast. March 6 p.m., it's dark out. June, summer solstice, 9 a.m., they're extending into Route 9. Not quite as far as March, obviously. Same story at noon in June. They're covering the sidewalks essentially on Route 9. 3 p.m. they're really just shading, Tully, Hawley, parts of Hammond Street. June 6 p.m. they're, that's sunset. So then they're starting to, extend a little bit further to the southeast there. And then September, it's pretty much identical to March.
Ethan. We'll go to Steve for the hand up next.
Yeah. First of all, I'm going to reiterate some of the things that my colleagues have mentioned. First, and by the way, I attended an EDAB meeting a couple of Friday afternoons ago. So I looked at some of this documentation prior to that meeting, and it looks like there's been some additional information added. And I didn't look at the materials for this meeting, but I'm glad to see it's been fleshed out a bit. I echo Matt's concern about the amount of commercial that's required. And, Matt's firm knows as much about doing commercial and mixed use development as any firm around. So I take his concern seriously. And it also, rings true when I look at how difficult it's been for even more modest developments, like a couple of the 40Bs on Harvard Street in the Coolidge Corner area to fill their modest commercial spaces. And then there's the big commercial space that's still empty in Brookline Village at the Children's Hospital building. I understand that's a developer that's not particularly motivated, that maybe doesn't care about, deriving income from their ground floor space, but still to leave it empty, it makes me ask how much demand there is for that kind of space in these locations. I also agree with Maria's concern about setbacks. A couple of the images that we didn't see today.
Did you mean Andrea?
I'm sorry. Andrea, thank you, Maria. A couple of images that we didn't see today, but are in the package, were the street sections for Tully Street and Holly Lane. And Andrea also added the question about setbacks even along Route 9. And those street sections to me look daunting with the, minimum setbacks, maybe a 5-foot sidewalk and a 5-foot setback, a 10-foot public realm on those streets, which I don't think is adequate for buildings of this scale. I know you mentioned and showed a nice image of, establishing cohesion between the streetscape and architecture. And some of the images that you show, I don't think would be what this would result in as built. So those are some of the concerns I have. I have a further concern about the amount of space that would be allowed. Oh, big picture. I think this planning work is excellent. But I feel like the work that's been done on the City Realty and Growth Company's parcel, the left component of the CH4 zoning, makes a lot of sense because it's practically a tabula rasa. As Matt pointed out, what will happen elsewhere with all of the existing buildings and infrastructure, it's hard to imagine how that will all evolve over time. With a number of buildings, some of the larger buildings like the residences at Boylston Place, which isn't going anywhere anytime soon, some of the larger mixed-use office buildings, how that will evolve, who knows? And I almost wonder whether it's worth trying to be so specific. I guess it can't hurt, but I think what we really are focusing on is what's going to happen in this big 5-acre plus parcel. And then within that parcel, the one thing which I think is unresolved is I see a lot of specifics about setbacks and from lot lines between parcels in different ownership in the other portions of this district, but I don't see where that applies to the 4.0 district, specifically between the growth company's parcel and the city realty parcel. And even one of the images showed like a very narrow space between a possible, massing on the growth company's parcel and the easternmost component of the city realty parcel. I don't think that's nearly enough. I don't see anything in the zoning that establishes a required standard there, unless it's been added since I last looked at it 2 weeks ago. So those are if you could put up a Tully Street or a Holly Lane street section, just for my colleagues on the planning board to see what I'm talking about. And I have one other comment that'll be more understandable when those sections come up.
Page 35 of what's in the agenda. Although Ethan's numbering might be different because he did a excerpted one.
Oh, by the way, I'm really glad to see those shadow studies because, and I think one of the big moves that's been made in this planning is to move the tallest building from the west end of the growth company's parcel to the east end, because it shows that there's virtually no impact on any Brookline living resident.
While Ethan is pulling those slides up, I just want to say we have some design labs with the 40Bs, and even though they are 40Bs, there were some geometry considerations, because as you move east, those blocks and those parcels, north-south become much more compressed. So there are some geometry considerations regarding those setbacks, if you want to look at those plans separately.
So this is what I'm talking about. This street is 40 feet wide, and then there's a 5-foot sidewalk and I think a maximum 5-foot setback. So to me, there's barely enough room to put in a street tree, never mind
Exactly.
Never mind I'm sorry, the term, I'm blanking on the term, like, one of these sort of open areas around the base of a tree that's also
Tree well.
Well, not just a tree well, but
Tree pit.
no, not a pit. That's something that goes beyond that. That's more
planter.
environmental. Excuse me?
Planter, maybe.
Oh no, it's a more environmental.
Bioswale?
Yes, that's it exactly. Thank you. Like, never mind, maybe that's asking for too much, but there's just not enough room here on this street section. And the same is true for Tully Street, I think. And one other point I'd make, this isn't the best example of it because of the huge setback, but I feel like that second set, I'm thinking of buildings that have a base, middle, and top. And to me, the proportions between base here, which I would consider the first 3 or 4 stories, middle, and then top is wrong. I mean, ideally, I would like to see that big setback or even the more modest setback in the other locations where it's 10 and 10 be at a higher level. And this to me does not read like base, middle, and top. The top, it seems top heavy, especially where the upper level setbacks aren't as dramatic as this 60-foot or whatever. Those are my thoughts at the moment.
Thank you, Steve. So with apologies, it is 9:30. So Blair, you have the wheel. Thank you all. Appreciate the time and the presentation. I will see you all at a future meeting.
Well, I don't think that this, I guess we're going to go probably at 10 at most. And I don't think that we're going to be covering everything. I hope that there's an opportunity for planning board members in a more of a workshop setting to get into the weeds here, such as I think what Steve, you were looking at in terms of those cross sections. I think those are very important issues. And not to put you on the spot, Mark, but as a member of the committee, do you have some comments you'd like to share here?
I do. And I guess it would be very easy for me to get into the weeds because of what I know and what we've discussed during the. So I'll try and keep it at a higher level. In looking at this development and understanding how it sort of came about, it's interesting that the 4.0 district was actually developed by a financial analysis, and that's okay. But then when you look at the neighborhood input and the other inputs that were discussed with regard to heights of buildings and so forth, I think that what happens is that there's sort of a disconnect, because on the one hand, no connection to Heath Street leads to maybe too much circulation on site. And then you say to yourself, well, why wouldn't we include the other areas in the 4.0 as well, or the next area over, if we're trying to maximize what we want to develop here. So to me, it's also interesting that because I had been involved in the Boylston Street corridor study earlier, a couple of years ago, to look at what the Boylston Street is, or what Boylston Street is and what the image is. And I noticed that the rendering that Sasaki did over the top of the intersection left out the central barrier, the fence that sort of separates one side from the other. It's interesting that the other side of Boylston Street, the way it's been developed, it has no sidewalk. And so on our side, we have a sidewalk development that, we should actually celebrate if we're going to put commercial space there. And the reality of it is it's treated, like a 19th century idea, not even a 21st or 20th century idea of what commercial is. Because you're looking at Heath Street, with a center, Boylston Street with a center barrier, and you're looking at commercial along the entire strip. And the renderings really look terrific, but how do you get there? Where do you park your car? How do you do this? How do you do that? And exactly what is the final, transition of what retail space really is. There's two things in the zoning bylaw I find interesting, and that is that you have 150 foot or 175 foot buildings, but it's only indicated that they need to be separated by 25 feet. That indicates a different type of massing to me. And I think that what it really probably should do is, if you have a building and you have to end it and there's 25 feet between the next building and they're both 100 feet tall or 150 feet tall, I mean, what is that space really? So it probably should be more of a monolithic block in terms of what it looks like. I took a ride around North Point in Cambridge, and I took a ride around the Seaport District in Boston. And I see that these developments are sort of larger. They're certainly with Boston, it's involved in a larger, part of the city as well, with connections and so forth. But what we have here in Brookline is an island. And if you look at the zoning along Boylston Street from Brookline Village all the way out, you see that it's not only mixed and it's not only different, but there's nothing like this at all that's shown. There's nothing out further towards Wellesley, and there's nothing closer in. So there's really no transitions in Brookline in terms of a buildup of a zoning district into another zoning district, which would allow for the development of the types of buildings we have here. So you basically have an island. And I think it's really a question of what the town wants in terms of, I just heard about a new group called Progressive Brookline. And I guess you could call it progressive if you define the word that way, or you could actually look for a different meaning to it. And a different understanding, and I guess this business of actually keeping all this commercial space rented is going to be pretty hard, because I don't think that what's been thought about is what is the future of retail and how are we going to do this, and shouldn't it be designed a different way? So that's at the higher level of this discussion. And the last thing I wanted to say is that this tree requirement is going to be really difficult to deal with on this site. The tree bylaw really is written for a different type of town fabric, not this fabric at all. And you could give lip service to it, but the application of it in such a way is going to be very difficult and may not be able to deal with that. So I guess we'll leave it up to the town to decide. But the reality here is that the zoning change doesn't really provide anything for the town. What it provides is a development framework for developers, but it doesn't require anything in terms of bona fide open space or pedestrian movement that's sort of ingrained in the actual limits of what the zoning says. So the zoning would allow for open space, it would allow for landscaped area, it would allow for this or that, but it doesn't really say how it could be developed or how much of it can be developed. And I like the outline of the open space that Sasaki did. It makes a lot of sense. I'd like to see how that could be actually imprinted on the zoning regulations and guideline standards for the development that happens within these areas. I'll stop there. I think that obviously we need to get this developed and we need to do it in a correct way. I also agree that things aren't going to happen right away, however, but they could happen right away on the City Realty site because of the way that we discussed it in the meetings. And I just think that we have to be very careful of the unintentional consequences of creating an island like this in the middle of Boylston Street. Thank you.
Can I follow up with that?
Yeah, please, Andrea.
I don't think that an island is a bad thing. I see it more as an urban center and a communal center meeting space for people to live, work, and shop. And about Matt's comment about the 60% of the ground floor, there are examples of that now. Granted, they are like islands, as Mark says, but these developments take time, decades, to sort of grow into their own identity. One example is Continuum, which is a residential building at Western Ave in Alston. It has a Trader Joe's, a restaurant. I think the rest of the ground floor space is empty, but the Trader Joe's is doing pretty well. The restaurants, I think, turned over once, but seems to be doing well. And with the addition of the ART down the street, all these developments take time to develop an identity and a ground use. So I kind of see the 60% ground floor rule as okay. There's lots of examples where big box stores are downsizing. They don't need to store all that much inventory. Consumers are buying online, they pick it up. So there's lots of examples of smaller Targets. There's the CVS in the Brookliner, which is, I don't know if it's in Brookline or Boston on Washington and Corey Road. So these are all new developments that appear as an island, but eventually they'll grow. So I don't have an issue with the 60%.
Do we want to take any public comment here? I'm thinking we have about 20 more minutes.
Blair, I just have a question
sure. Go
for Meredith and or Maria. I know this is an overlay district and we're talking about standards and guidelines. And I guess I'm not clear on exactly in this instance, you know, how much authority the planning board has for approval and in what instances this ends up also going to the zoning board. If somebody could give us a quick summary of how that works in this instance. I don't, it may already be out there in the zoning that's been proposed, but that's one thing I don't remember exactly.
So projects under this zoning would be subject to section 509 design review and a special permit. And the ZBA would be the permit granting authority. The planning board, of course, you would have your familiar role with design review.
So the usual process.
Yes.
Okay.
Okay, Blair, let's see if there's any public comment, because we only have, even the staff has to end by a minute before 10 o'clock.
Do we want to take any public comment here? I see Michael Rubenstein has his hand up and so does Carla. So in that order, please.
Thank you. I'll try to be brief. And I really appreciate the level of detail and examination that you are applying both to the design guidelines and the zoning. I did want to make one clarification just to understand in the tenor of the conversation. And that was a lot of the discussion about commercial buildings was focused on, sounded like from the conversation to be focused primarily on retail. But I just want to also make the point that there are other forms of commercial development that can be sort of part of the identity of this space. As you know, probably the City Realty lot is proposing a multi-floor, 4-floor hotel. There's medical office space in this area. And so in the consideration of the 60% commercial percentage, particularly for the CHC 4.0 and the CHC 3.0, where that requirement exists, whether it's 51% or 60% for the bonus height, there's a sort of a broader range of uses. And you know, this may be something to review in the use table to consider all of the different possibilities. And it is certainly true that the neighborhood mixed use and the transit-oriented mixed use areas on the northern side and the eastern side of the district can probably be more residential. I will also note in the comments that have been made around the time frame that this is going to take, there was mention of the assisted living facility, but there are also large-scale condo buildings. There's also a 6-unit affordable condo building within the NMU district. And of course, the 40B that is just going up now on the corner of Hammond and Boylston Street. So I just want to echo Matt's comments in terms of the time it's going to take to sort of transition and build up the identity for this area. Is as much as we might like to create an area with a strong identity, it is going to take time and transition. So I'll leave my comments there.
Carla, why don't you go ahead?
Okay, thank you. I've got to admit, my head is kind of swirling.
Carla, can you go ahead?
Yes, thank you. I was starting to say that my head is really swirling. This has been a very interesting discussion, particularly because I think the planning board is naturally taking a bigger, a wider perspective on this than the EDAB meeting the other evening, simply because of the very nature of those groups. There has been some talk during this meeting about zoning, which got me to look at the Article 1, the purpose of zoning in the town's zoning bylaw, and I don't see any mention of economic development as being a purpose, a specific purpose. which I think is interesting and maybe something that the planning board or planning staff or somebody wants to take another look at, because we may want to amend that bylaw. But more relevant now to the discussion at hand, because my neighborhood in precinct 14 is very close to that oriented sub-district. I've got a real problem, and Meredith I'm sure, is tired of hearing me say this, but that little sliver is very close to 2 local historic districts. And we can talk about change, and maybe local historic district designations will go by the boards in the next 50 years, who knows? But the only way I can look at this proposal is thinking about it in the current context. It is suburban. To make it a, quote, urban sub-district because it's near public transportation, I don't think is enough. That little sliver leads into the Star Market and single-story buildings and one larger building and then onto the street. But all of that, to me, says suburban. It's not urban. And the 2 residential neighborhoods, both the one in Newton and the one in Brookline, close by, are by and large single-family districts. So I don't think there's enough transition to justify in the current proposal. I don't believe there's enough transition between the commercial area and the residential areas. And I also wonder, what's the neighborhood here? Who's the neighborhood here? It's really easy to say south of Route 9, there's the Chestnut Hill Village and those neighborhoods, but who's the neighborhood on the other side of Route 9? Neighborhood includes Newton. And so far as I know, this hasn't really been discussed in any kind of detail with the city of Newton or the Newton's Chestnut Hill neighborhood. So those are my comments, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Carla. Before I go to Steve, any other comments from members of the public? Okay, Steve, you're on.
Thanks, Blair. Carla's mentioning the fundamental purpose of zoning had me open up my old printed copy of the Brookline zoning bylaw. And one thing we know, that zoning was established initially to separate uses. We had zones. You could build industrial here and residential there, and never the twain shall meet, and commercial somewhere in between. You know, we've gotten long past that. Brookline's own version of the purpose, the first one is encouraging the most appropriate use of land. That's the first, sub item in our zoning, which is what I think this is trying to do. Further down the list, assisting in the economical provision of transportation, water, sewage, schools, parks, and other public facilities. How do we do that? We need to raise tax revenue, which is, again, why we're looking at something like this. So I don't think this is at all inconsistent with the purposes of zoning. And, things change, and that's what this opportunity is before us. And is it going to change overnight, as several people have said? No. But we know where the initial opportunity is, and that's what we're trying to facilitate here.
I think I want to make one further comment, and this is kind of building on what Mark said, which is talking about the whole Boylston Street corridor, the character of it. Starting down where the new hotel, the Hilton Garden Inn is, and the Children's Hospital development, which is adjacent to Brookline Village, which is probably one of the more, or if not most, urban character areas in town. I mean, because most of Coolidge Corner is kind of lower scale, a lot of single-story commercial buildings. But I think that's part of what people really like about Brookline Village. And I'm going to segue into one of the beefs that the planning board had about the rezoning of Harvard Street in terms of its height, 4 stories, and the view of the planning board, which is that's insufficient to encourage development. And I underline encourage development because I think the zoning overlay here is being driven by encouraging development in today's market. And that's why I'm going to go back to Mark's comment about like what along this whole Boyle Street corridor is appropriate. I don't object to the more urban character. Now I'm going to speak as personally here, not as a a member of the planning board as such. But I think the issue for the town is how high is appropriate here, and to what extent does that become a kind of template for other areas in town that can be redeveloped for a commercial stop and shop site, areas along Commonwealth Avenue, areas in St. Mary and Washington Square. So I think that this is both a local issue and I think also a townwide issue. Like, what do we want here? And I think Carlo is speaking a bit to that. And I know in various public hearings this has come up. So I really want to underline that. I think it's personally, I'm more supportive of higher heights than most neighbors are. So I'll just kind of leave it at that. But underline again, I think Mark's comment and where are we going here as a town? Steve, I see you have your hand up again.
Yeah, I'll be brief.
Please.
Blair, you mentioned Brookline Village as being a very characterful area, but this reminds me that when Meredith started this presentation, she talked about going way back that the area we're currently talking about is Gateway West. And in fact, our Gateway East, Mark talked about islands, is in some ways another island. We have the Emerald Island, which the planning board was participated in rezoning that with a high-rise hotel, several medical office buildings that are high-rise buildings, and across on the south side of Route 9, the high-rise condominium complex. So there is an island of high-rise buildings right at the eastern gateway to the town. We're talking about something that would mirror that at the western gateway to the town. And who knows what WS will do with the street as they go down the road. But I think there is a parallel there that
the difference in that area, Steve, is that there's transition zones up to, what you could consider an island, which is not really an island because it's surrounded by transition. When you look at the zoning, the zoning map or that we have right now, just take a look at it and you'll see the buildup to those areas. And then also Boston is on the other side of the road. I just think that the whole idea of transition needs to, if you wanted it to be part of the planning process, then you could make it that way, or not. You could just do it this way. But I just think that the whole idea of transition is really what everyone is concerned about in different ways. Like it's different for anyone's interpretation of what that transition is, except for those folks who are really not concerned about, tall buildings, But the fact that you could have a 150-foot building 25 feet away from another 125-foot building, I think is a problem. And that maybe could be rectified by the planning board during the site review process. Maybe even by the applicants themselves in discussing it. But at some point, if you allow it, it's going to happen. So I just think that there are some issues with this that zoning that is not ready for prime time, in my view. And I think that this whole idea, and I'm just going to go back to it once more, and that is that the concept of how you use commercial or want to use commercial, is a 19th century idea here in this development and in this zoning manifestation that we're looking at right now. We need to come up with a new idea if we want to do this, I think, for commercial space.
Okay, unfortunately, we have to end because it's 10 o'clock. I think it's been a great discussion. I want to thank all the planning board members and Meredith and Maria and the Sasaki team. And we will be having planning board zoning hearings in the
Oh,
spring. Yes,
Holly, could we, I mean, I think this has been a really good conversation. I think there's a lot more that needs to be said, and I'm wondering whether we could have another go at this in an evening meeting so more public could come. I think that we've given Sasaki some good feedback. I don't think they need to particularly change their graphics or anything, but maybe it will give them something to modify maybe in how they characterize some of the proposals. I think you hear of Mark's, comment as well, but I don't think this is the end of this discussion. So I would hope that we could do this in an evening.
all right, I will discuss that with Meredith.
Okay.
Thank you very much,
Well, thank you,
everybody.
everybody.
Have a
All right.
nice day.
All right.
Bye.
Thank you for your
Bye.
feedback.